Okay, I think we're ready to get started. I want to welcome each of you to the USA Regenerative Agriculture Alliance Incorporated 2021 Spring Workshop. We are very excited with our program this afternoon, and our goal is to provide educational information for your benefit. We want to thank Plastic Innovation for providing the space for the workshop this year and being the major sponsor for this event. I would like to introduce members of our team that have provided their time in putting this workshop together. I don't see Russ, but Russ Israel, there you are. Russ is the owner of Plastic Innovation, which is the home of the Timeless Fence System. He is also the founder of the USA Regenerative Agriculture Alliance that was formed in 2019. The next team member is Brad Moore. Brad Moore is our COO and General Manager of Plastic Innovation. Brad's done a lot of legwork in trying to get the nonprofit started off. There's a lot of paperwork and things, and appreciate all the work that Brad has done on that. Lissa Morrison, back here. Lissa is the Director of Marketing for PI, but that's not her only duty. She's the backbone to everything that goes on inside this building, I'm going to tell you. So if anybody has any questions, go to her. She's got the answer. Terry Sizemore, I don't think he's in here, but he's the account manager, and he's done a lot of work with our finances and keeping us straight along those lines. Melanie Hillard is a graphic design for Plastic Innovation and for the nonprofit, and Melanie is in the very back. Also, Sherry Ottinger, known as the Tennessee Dirt Girl, and she's with us, and she is our horticulturist. She doesn't like me saying that, but she is. She's the one we go to for all the raised beds and all the plantings and trees, and she gets all the varieties and researches all that stuff, so that's all on her shoulders. So we thank her for everything that she does. Also outside, there was two men, Nathan Hudson and Dylan Hall, that were parking vehicles or kind of getting you parked, and they're our cleanup crew. They do all the odd jobs, plus just a little bit of everything. So, you know, you got to have a lot of people to put something like this on, and working with the nonprofit and Plastic Innovation, we all wear a lot of hats around here. So we appreciate their work and what they do. I want to thank Ward Laboratories, that's in Nebraska. They will be the one that are sponsoring our meal today. Casey France, back in the back, is with us, and she works as account development and support manager. She came all the way from Nebraska just to be with us today. That's not really true. I think she had some clients in Nashville, Middle Tennessee, didn't you? Well, we appreciate her coming, and we'll talk a little bit more about her in a minute. I also right now would like to introduce the board of directors for the USA Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. Myself, I'm Mike McElroy, I'm the president. Larkin Clemmer is the secretary-treasurer. I saw him somewhere. Right there. Okay, Larkin. Russ Israel is a member. Wayne Hughes is a member. Barry Bales is a member. Patrick Johnson is a member. Ben Godfrey, I don't think I've seen Ben yet. Okay, is a member. Sherry Ottinger is a member, and Gavin Langford is a member. So we have a pretty good group of people there, and everybody's got their own little things that they can do, and we have to lean on each other for that. A couple of housekeeping details that I'd like to go over. The restrooms, if you go through this door, stay on the left-hand side of the roped off area, and it walks you right around to the restrooms. Also, we have water back in the coolers back in the back. we ask you, we have a garbage can back there that is for the recycled plastic bottles. So when you get done, if you would put those in there, we would appreciate that very much. Sometime during this event, haven't figured out how I'm going to do it yet, but it'll work. We're going to have drawings, and we have 4 boxes up front, okay? So listen carefully. I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. If you don't understand, raise your hand, slap me upside the head, whatever you want to do. So the first drawing is going to be for the Haney test. The Haney test is provided by Ward Laboratories out of Nebraska. I have 2 certificates. If you are a row crop producer or if you are a livestock producer and you would like to have a Haney test, and later on that's going to be explained what that is. Sort of along the lines of a soil test, but it's a lot deeper in depth, okay? Go ahead and take your ticket, break them off, keep one ticket, take the other ticket and put it in the box for the Haney test if that's what you'd like to be held for a drawing. The second box is for raised crazy mix. Now, if you are a forage producer, this can be, now forages, that's pasture and that's hay, okay? Then go ahead and drop your ticket in the box that says raised crazy mix. And I think we're going to have, 8 bags that we're going to draw for. The third one, if I have them in the right order, will be a troubleshooting and consultation with the Tennessee Dirt Girl. It's a 2-hour session. Okay, so if you have some backyard gardening issues and problems and troubleshooting that you don't know how to handle, then we're going to give you 2 hours with Sherry Ottinger, the Tennessee Dirt Girl. And last but not least, David Bryant with Smoky Mountain Cattle Consulting has provided several items, hats, I think some tags, different things. And if you would like to have a drawing for that, then go ahead and stick that in the 4th box. So you have a choice, but remember the Haney test for crop producers, livestock producers, and the raised crazy mix for your livestock, for your forage producers, and so on. And we will ask you to put your tickets in those boxes as you're going to eat. And then sometime during that time, maybe while we're eating or whatever, but before you leave, we're going to do the drawings. Okay? All right. Our first speaker this afternoon is Greg Brann, and Greg is going to be talking about grazing multi-species. Greg is a multi-species farmer. He worked as the state grazing specialist, health specialist, for 23 years of his 40-year tenure with NRCS. His private consulting practice, Synergistic, hope I said that right, grazing management, provides land management planning to farmers, ranchers, land preservation organizations, and public land managers. At this time, I'm going to ask Greg to come up.
I can stay down here, can I? Yeah, good. All right, so I'm going to be talking about multi-species grazing, and that could be a flirt, you could run them separate. There's all kinds of ways to do things, and we all know that. So this is my place here. The one on the left is a picture from about, 30 years ago when my dad was running things. And we used to cut hay and in the bottomland, and we grazed the upland. He had 300 cows back then. He did a good job, rotated about every 2 weeks to once a month, had a big herd, big fields. Didn't keep up the perimeter so well, so my brother and I decided to put in a new perimeter fence, and so we thought, well, we might as well fence for goats as well. And I'll get into the evolution of all that in a minute. one of Dad's sayings was, you don't want too good a fence because they can't get back in. Now here we are moving them down a county road there. That's a rental house, and that's some of the sheep out on the land there. I've had as many as 300 ewes, 300 nannies, the 300 cows. I don't know why 300 keeps coming up, but that's kind of where we go. And then I vary it a whole lot based on a number of things. And right now we direct market, so it's based on what the sales are. So I'm up in the beef, and I've decreased the beef and the goats some, but I have brought goats back. This is, I thought this was funny. We'd rotated into that field and we'd held off a little too long. That's giant ragweed there. And if you're familiar with keeping up with what different plants and all, animals love giant ragweed. Now these sheep are just running around the outside because I'd mowed around it to manage some fence and all, and they would still be running if I hadn't stopped them. If you're familiar with sheep, they're so flock oriented, they'll just keep going. So I finally, after about 3 or 4 rounds, I just said, this has got to stop. So we broke in there. You see a dog in there in the mix. This is just to get you oriented. This is something like Ray's Crazy Mix here, where it was coming out of cropland. That's where I like to use annuals to transcend over to perennials. Now that's in a mix of perennials, but at that time it was a warm season mix, and then a cool season mix, warm season mix, then perennials. Uh-oh, I blacked us out. Yeah, so here's what I plan to cover is, well, first off, they'll eat whatever's out there, but I'm a vegetation guy. Somebody asked me the other day, what turns me on the most about farming, what do I enjoy the most, and it's the grass before they graze it. The animals are just there to manage the grass is my way of thinking. I've come around and become an animal guy too, but at first it was all about just the forage. So, but you can't really do that because the profit is really in the animals. But anyway, we're going to talk about the goal. Everybody needs to have a goal for their operation, where you're headed, that type of thing. Then what proportion, how many sheep, how many goats, how many cattle, how should it be proportioned? We're going to hopefully cover that. Should it be all run together, and we call that a flood, a flock and a herd mixed? Or should it be leader-follower? That gets a little complicated. Or just separate groups. Of course, sheep and goats eat things that cattle don't eat. Sheep are almost little cows. I would never say that about a goat, but because they graze so different, their preference is to browse. And of course, cattle love to browse too if there was enough of it. And then internal parasites, feet problems. We'll talk a little bit about working facilities, predators. And I've packed all this in to 20 minutes, hopefully. And y'all give me times out whenever my time's up. So buckle up, we're fixing to take off here. Why would you add different species? Well, for one thing, Idaho State did some research, and I've found this to be true. You can increase your meat production by about 24% by adding small ruminants to a cattle operation. Oddly, when they added cattle to a sheep operation, they only increased production by 9%. That's how efficient the sheep are. Sheep will graze, they just keep grazing. As long as something's green out there, they're going to keep grazing. And that can be a bit of a problem because you could overgraze every field. So you got to be aware of that and treat it a little different. But there is hay savings available there. The nutrient recycling, goat manure is almost like pelletized fertilizer. And they turn the multiflora rows into fertilizer. That's a lot of value in that. Of course, the weed control. Sheep and goats, they don't pay attention to where the poop falls. Not like cattle. Cattle avoid where the poop is and don't graze there. And that's a little bit of a plus for that species because they don't get coccidiosis. Of course, there's some internal parasites like worms that come through that too. So we need to graze a little higher. Breeding age, they can breed at 10 months of age. Gestation period's about 5 months. You can wean them at 3 months. It's pretty incredible what we can do with the small ruminants. Of course, fencing is a challenge. Culling is your main. It's real important in all species, of course, but with cattle with sheep and goats, it's very, very important to cull things with bad feet, prone to internal parasites. You need to get rid of those and just not worry about propping them up. So if we have a lot of briars out there, multiflora rows and all, we ought to have more goats. If we have a lot of buttercup out there, sheep. Sheep love buttercup. Not that they need 100% buttercup. Nothing needs a monoculture like that, but they will select it even above clover. It's incredible, their selection of buttercup, and I've got a picture of that. And then cattle, if you have real tall growth, the cattle go off in it because they're not a prey species like sheep and goats are. All right. I threw this in here. This is multi-species as well. Whenever I do a new seeding, I'll throw some zucchini in there, and none of my animals eat it. So you can just harvest it out in the pasture. Pretty cool. That one was wilted because it was midsummer. So again, we started by putting up a perimeter fence of multi-high tensile wire, and so we could run the goats, and now we can run any species pretty much. Sometime I've run pigs with them as well, but now I run the pigs separate because of their rooting that they do. The low wire is the most important. Sheep and goats usually go under, not over. If they go over, they need to jump on a trailer. I like to start, you need some woven wire on the place. I don't have much, but it's good to have a place you can contain them. And I like that high tensile woven wire. You can space your post out as much as 20. The manufacturer says 30 feet, but that's for the perimeter. High tensile woven wire is pretty incredible. You can retrofit fences. We'll look at a few options on that, and that's what we did. We had a lot of single wire. We changed it over to three wire or more, and just added the wires and added some posts. So yeah, we had cattle first, then we added goats, then we added sheep, we added more sheep, and now we're back to decreasing the sheep and adding cattle. And again, what you have out there should somewhat be based on what vegetation's available. So introducing new species. I had a buddy and he brought in some llamas, dumped them off the truck, and his cattle were found about 3 or 4 farms away. They thought dinosaurs had come off of the trailer. So need to get them oriented, and so put them in that woven wire fence to begin with. Have an offset electric so you can break them to electric if that's what you have. And then after about 3 days of them running side by side, you might turn them rotate to a new pasture so that animals aren't, like the cattle, aren't defending their territory type thing. And then it's the dogs that are the biggest transition. The dogs guardian dogs running up and down the fence, barking at the cattle, and the cattle, of course, are protective against dogs, so they've got to get used to each other. So I turn into a big field, give them plenty of space, and it all works out. There's an offset for electric, and that's just one type. There's a lot of different offsets, and the barbed wire and electric don't mix so well because if the animal got hung in the wire, then they would thrash themselves to death. So, but it's a heck of a fence, and it's a way to retrofit. First I want to say something about, you see some timeless fence posts there that I've used on the back side to fence off. Those are chestnuts that are in the tree tubes, and not all tree tubes are the same either. This one was by Tubex. It's my favorite one, maybe a little more costly. But I also want to say something about the Buttercup. The buttercup is a sign of low oxygen typically. It could be compaction or wetness. In this case, I just released it. That'd been sprayed with Roundup under that fence. This is several years ago, and it released that buttercup because there's no competition. So, and then that other area is going into the cattle corral, so it gets a little more compaction. Lots of options in fencing. Electronet is laborsome, but it's also predator control. It's like woven wire in a roll. The poly wire is for dividing up pastures. It's fast and easy, and Gallagher's my favorite brand on poly wire, and reels. The high tensile wire, I like it because it's a lot cheaper than the woven wire. And then woven wire around the perimeter, I like the high tensile again. So, but we've got to keep them in. You know, you can't just add them out there and think they're going to stay in a barbed wire fence. Although I have seen people keep them in a barbed wire fence, they had 9 strands and the posts were about 6 foot apart. So there's some poly wire. 3 strands is what we use. There's people that keep them in with 1 strand. They rotate daily and they have plenty of forage for them. If you're running a fleur like cattle and sheep together, you would probably still need 2 wires minimum, because you usually put the controlling wire at nose height of the animal. All right, should you forward graze? In what order should you forward graze? And forward grazing is one animal going in front of another, and the animal needing the most nutrition should go first. So if we had a dairy, it'd be the lactating cows would go first and then the dry cows. Well, we can make it more complicated when we think of all the different variables in grass. There's a rule of thumb is that you don't graze a field over 4 days because you give regrowth of the grass and it can impact the grass growth by grazing more than 4 days. So that means you need to rotate every 2 days. If one group moves, both groups move. The order of nutritional needs of the animal, of course, the lactating, growing animal that's trying to breed back, that's like a first calf heifer. That's why she's so hard to breed back, is because she has a high nutritional need. She would go first. And then the dry cow would go last or second. The pecking order, cattle are first, then goats, and then sheep. In general, there's always exceptions to everything. Sometimes we'll carry a roll of hay into a field and sheep will be all around it, and then within 5 minutes there's no sheep around it. So you need to be observant. And some ways to deal with that is in my terrain, it's rugged like here, is you might unroll the first row or put the first row out there, cattle go to it, then go around the other way and put out the best row and the sheep get in. And you can do other ways by having high wires, like a high electric wire. Like here's an example here is that the cows can be held back with a high wire like 42 inches. And then you could let the calves go forward and the sheep go forward. Then you could hold the calves back with the next wire. And you have different quality hay or different quality grass. And then you hold back the sheep with like 3 wires. Sometimes I'll feed some alfalfa or some cereation. I noticed that AU grazers available from our seed folks here, so you might visit with them about that. That's one of the better cereatias for natural deworming. Yeah, I'll just move on. Yeah, so if you've got a deep water tank, it's important to have blocks in there so that the sheep and goats can escape, and have the water level high enough that they don't tumble off into the tank and get drowned. The internal parasites are a big issue with sheep and goats if we graze below 5 inches. If you graze above 5 inches, it's not such a big deal. The cycle of the worm is 14 days for Haemonchus contortus or barbapoe worm. So if we can rest a pasture longer than that without animals on it, then we can break that cycle somewhat. However, they're very resilient, the internal parasites. They'll come back. So the lands I've listed there on the left, those are a lot cleaner. If it's been hayed, cut for silage, grazed by cattle, cattle and sheep don't share the same internal parasites to any extent. Sheep and goats do share same internal parasites. How many people have sheep here? Many? No? Maybe one? How about goats? Yeah. And what about pigs? All right. Yeah. So there's opportunities. These plants have tannins in it. Mike, you only got 2 minutes? Oh boy, I'm slow. We're gonna have to really speed up. No, we'll just be wherever we are. So these plants have tannins in it, so they're natural dewormers. And the top of the heap is the Serratia lespedeza, but there's issues that come with Serratia lespedeza from the naturalist. They don't like it. And a lot of these plants you wouldn't want to plant, but if they're out there, you could utilize them. And they're not as low quality as we might think. In fact, I would bet money that most weeds are higher quality than the grass, if they're vegetative. There's some ragweed, it's equal to alfalfa. There's the buttercup being selectively grazed. There's some sheep minerals. I've cut out the cattle with that 34-inch high poly wire, just keeping the cattle from knocking them over or eating the high value sheep mineral. One thing that's really important is kind of new is that copper's not as toxic as we once thought. Now I just let the sheep have and goats have the mineral that the cattle get. But don't call me if all your sheep and goats die, because it's on the horizon, and there's a lot of people out there that are trying it, even real high rates of copper, because we get some benefits for internal parasites by feeding higher copper. That's running them together. There's cattle, sheep, goats, pigs. There's probably a llama in there. Anyway, and you see the dog just saying, "It's a party, come on, y'all join us." And I'm afraid that they might even welcome a coyote. So that's an after picture. That's some brome grass. Mike and I were talking the other day that it's rescue grass is the name of it, or persister brome if you're ordering seed, is a great grass for the shade areas. Rumen field, watch the rumen field on the cattle. Make sure that it's always level and full. There's a quick coupler. There's my favorite trough for multi-species, is Rubbermaid with a Gallagher float. I won't say anything there. Natural fly control, and Mike, I'm almost there, is garlic and oregano. I feed 1 pound of each, and that put it in 50 pounds of mineral, and that gives us natural fly control. It's worked real well. I know I've had a number of people do it, and nobody's told me it didn't work. Flies aren't a problem usually on sheep unless you're feeding grain or you have fly strike in wool sheep. There's a walk-through fly trap. That's a before picture of woods, and there's an after picture. The recovery time on woods is about 25 years. So if you graze it once, you're pretty well done. That's something on nutrient management. The animals prefer to graze where you have the nutrients balanced. That's all I'll say there. That's my cattle corral I like real well. We have a pasture walk, and this year it's October 14th, and welcome y'all to come join us. You can get with Mike or Jesse, and they can hook you up. So, Mike?